Hello there, Star Wars fans. Today I want to talk about a character that has been making the rounds ever since Ahmed Best returned to Star Wars under a new role as Jedi Master Kilaren Beck. That character that we're going to talk about today, though, is his other character, Jar Jar Binks, and what happened to him after the Clone Wars. It's truly a sad, tragic story, and I hope we get a wrap-up to his story in some show or comic eventually here soon. But before we begin, please do consider subscribing, leaving a like to help continue to grow this daily Star Wars community. New fan fiction tomorrow, not going to spoil what it is yet, but new one tomorrow, so subscribe for that. Alright, let's get into Jar Jar Binks and his tragic history. So we know Jar Jar played an extremely significant role in the Clone Wars. When assassination attempts continued to fail on Padme but continued to pile up, the Senator of Naboo, Padme Amidala, had to go into hiding, and she had Jar Jar step in while she went into hiding. Jar Jar, of course, was given a life-changing opportunity, and he wanted to prove himself. Palpatine, other senators that worked very closely with Palpatine, they knew this. They knew Jar Jar could be easily manipulated, and, Jar Jar wanted to redeem himself in the eyes of his planet. Now, of course, he was manipulated, and eventually, in a Senate meeting, Jar Jar proposed giving the Chancellor emergency powers, and these emergency powers would stretch very crucial into the Clone Wars, and eventually into the Empire. There was actually a deleted scene in Revenge of the Sith that Ahmed Best, the actor, talked about that kind of was really sad for Jar Jar as he walked with Palpatine, and Palpatine kind of thanked him. It goes like this. This is directly from Ahmed Best, so this is his quote. In Revenge of the Sith, there was a scene that was cut where I'm walking down a long pathway with Ian McDiarmid before he is turned into the Emperor, Best explains. And Palpatine kind of thanks Jar Jar for putting him in power. It's a really interesting scene, and it shows the evolution of Jar Jar from the fun-loving kid's character into this manipulated politician. And it was an interesting arc for the character that I thought could have been explored, because this scene is really dark, but it just didn't fit in the movie, which I understand. But yeah, George's take on it is now Jar Jar is just a politician. That was the scene. It's interesting. I would have liked to see it, but yeah, it is what it is. And now, fast forward to the fall of the Republic. As we know, Jar Jar was exiled from his people before the events of the Phantom Menace, and he'd redeemed himself so much to be represented in the Senate. But now, under the Empire's rule, he was exiled from his people once again. His life turned into him being very alone, trying to make a living by being a jester on the street. This life for him would continue like this and stretch all the way to the New Republic era. Jar Jar would perform in the streets of Theed of Naboo as a clown for children. In fact, he actually became very loved by the children, but not by the adults, as Jar Jar was a face for people to put blame onto for the rise of the Empire. People hated the Empire. They wanted someone to blame, and Jar Jar was at the center of that on Naboo because of his emergency powers motion in the Senate. Many Gungan and Naboo adults, they would refuse to speak to him or even say his name. He'd be performing funny acts we'd see in the movies, like wagging his tongue, juggling, spitting up fish in the air and catching them, dancing around, Jar Jar things. And he'd be doing it. Kids would love it, but adults truly despised Jar Jar once the Empire came and even into the New Republic era. It's a truly tragic story. It probably represents where a lot of Republic senators or Republic people had to go once the Empire rose to power. People were going to be they weren't ever going to be very sympathetic to the people that, as they see it, helped form the Empire. They were exiled, they were treated differently. They were treated as people that helped grow this terrible empire. It's a shame, but that's just the way things were. People wanted someone to blame, or people to blame. Jar Jar was at the center of it. As we know, Binks, though, was influential in the Clone Wars to fight off threats like the Blue Shadow virus, and even he had missions with Jedi, like Anakin or Mace Windu. And unfortunately, despite all of his heroics, all of his missions, all of his helping out the Republic in the Clone Wars, it was all overshadowed by one mission, one motion in the Senate, that, of course, giving the Chancellor emergency powers. We don't know how Jar Jar's story ends, how he dies, when he dies, where he dies. We know none of it. So maybe we can see more of him. Maybe his story can end in a meaningful way. Maybe in a show. My hope or my thinking would be someday when we get I hope we get a Clone Wars type of New Republic thing with like Luke, Han, Leia. I think that'd be great. And maybe something like that in that animated show that I'm making up on the spot, we could get a Jar Jar episode where he has a nice heroic end. I think that'd be great. I don't know. I like Jar Jar. But let me know, what do you think? Did you know this about him? Do you find this interesting? What do you wish to see in Jar Jar's end, if he ever has one, in canon? Let me know. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.